Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kristen Bomas. This is Struck by Enlightenment. And joining me today is Johnny Behman. He is he went to music school. He's a beautiful musician. He is certified as a personal trainer, and he has a degree in culinary arts. But he is right now working at Morgan Stanley on the Behman Group team. So I really welcome you, Johnny. I'm so excited to go through this and really hear what your question is and have one of our really great conversations.
Thanks for having me on, Kristen. Yeah, I'm really excited. Um, so, I wanted to talk today about the inner dialogue. And I know it's something that you've talked a lot about in the past, but I feel like I have a somewhat unique um, perspective on it. And yeah, I think it's something that's super important. So, um, my my kind of day-to-day routine involves a lot of exercise, say more than the average. Um, and one of the things I love about exercise and physical activity is the strengthening of the mind and how it can kind of make you a better version of yourself, like obviously physically, but also mentally. And I think as I've gotten older and I um, probably matured, hopefully, um, uh, that the the pursuit of, I guess, character you could call it, or the pursuit of growing like the soul and your character is something that I found more and more, I'd say, rewarding to me. And uh, as I think about like internal dialogue, I think when you're trying to build yourself uh, from a person, like as a person, being able to talk to yourself and get your mind going down the right paths, I think all depends on your internal dialogue and what you're pulling from, like how you're speaking to yourself, how you're rewarding yourself internally. Um, and so I guess I'll give examples from my life. So I do a lot of cardio and a lot of training on a bike, and um, when I'm biking or anytime I'm doing something that is scary or stressful, there's there's a lot of ways I could handle that. I could choose to um, go to a fear-based. Uh, well, let me backtrack and give an example. So when let's say I'm biking and it's a difficult day, and I feel like I want to get off the bike. I could, there's a lot of ways I could leverage, or there's a lot of ways I could go about handling that mentally, where I could say, I have to go another hour, or I have to go another 30 minutes, and I can put these expectations on myself. Or I could think about it as, I go as long as you believe is good with yourself. Go as long as you feel is good. And that like specific example, I think it highlights a lot of things. I think it highlights the fear based expectations, but then it also highlights being able to not rely on fear based motives and go to intuition and using your own, going off your own, your own intuition, your own motivation based around the love of the effort and the exercise. So, it's funny. I had it so mapped out going into this podcast how I wanted to go through it, and then you get to the podcast and you're like they try to piece together the specifics to get to express. But
You'll get there.
Yeah, well,
I think as we talk it through, it kind of just opens itself up, right? Like what you've said so far is brilliant. It's like you're moving. You acknowledge the expectations. As you acknowledge those expectations, you realize there's a fear. The expectations are going to pull you away from the truth of why you're there. If you can shift, at least to a place where you start to really listen to that inner self, that soulful talk, that truth within that says, "Here I am." And if we can add a third piece to that and become, and I know this is where you would head at some point, become very present to the moment, then you're not thinking about the time, you're thinking about the moment. And one pedal after another pedal leads to another mile after another mile, but you're staying present to the minute and to the nature of your being and to the dream within. Like what's pulling you in this direction in the first place? Did I trigger something there?
No, I mean that's 100% it. And I think there's just so many, because I think a lot of people would see, would go throughout their maybe exercise and go, they'd use that as all right, I have to make it to this time, I have to do this many miles or whatever. And I think it's just these subtle things in these subtle changes on how you look at things that are pushing you in such a more beneficial way. And I think
I think oftentimes when people get involved in something like that, they set these goals, right? And initially it's a goal. Like I would really like to get out and bike and prepare myself for a 75-mile run with a group, right? And I'm not there yet, but I want to train to at least be able to do 75 miles a day. And they get out and they start training, and it's hard. And they want to give in to, wow, this is hard, this is difficult. And then when they feel that, they go either towards the expectations or towards the self's original goal. If the original goal is a match, it's much easier to get refocused, get present, and move forward. But too often people set these goals through expectations and that they think they should do or have to do or whatever, right? It's interesting. We have a previous podcast with Michelle where she talks about setting a New Year's resolution that was the craziest blessed. You're probably the only one I know, Johnny, who could actually have done this challenge. It's called a 90-day challenge, and it was insane. It was just insane for any normal person. 75-day challenge?
75 hard.
It was what?
75 hard.
75 hard? Is that what it was called? The 75-day hard challenge. And she did it. And it's the most insane thing you've ever heard in your life. And she was struggling, and so she was talking about how she couldn't give up, but she was struggling. And she was struggling with, I set this goal, I can't stop, but it's now become an expectation that I can't stop because of thoughts. But you'll have to listen to the podcast. It's pretty interesting. You're taking it to a really neat level, which is, what is our inner dialogue? Have we gotten to a place where we can really embrace our own self and what we're feeling on the inside? Can we embrace what made us step into this goal in the first place? What got us on that bike or whatever it is we're going to do? And can we stay focused? And that kind of goes back to, what's the experience that you were imagining when you stepped into this? What was it that you wanted to experience as a part of this experience, right? And if you can stay aware of that and present to the moment and stay in that experience, then all of a sudden you're opening up opportunities for yourself to progress forward and progress forward.
Yeah. And I think I think literally all the time. I think it's just I feel like I can't, or I feel like it's so important to think about how, like, every time you're speaking to yourself, you're either taking yourself down a path that's kind of not growth based and kind of hurting you, or growth based and helping you. And it's such a, I feel, important thing to be aware of and to think about and focus on in your day-to-day life, because I think it's gonna, once you are aware of all these ways in which you're kind of negatively shifting your mindset, it can open up a whole new world.
Right. And so as you look inside, and there now we go back to the fear-based versus the love-based, right? If I'm looking at this and I'm starting to really struggle and I'm getting lost in the struggle, then all of a sudden I'm fighting against my own self. I'm fighting to do something, but there's an internal dialogue that's a struggle, and it's got there's a fear associated with it. It could be a fear through the expectations. It could be a fear through I can't, old beliefs, limiting beliefs, things that were going on. It could bring back old memories of being pushed in a way that you didn't want to be pushed. It could be myriad things, right? So as we look at that, that's all on the fear-based side, and that's going to limit us. That's going to hold us back, and that creates a loss of energy, which makes it even more difficult to, if in this case we're using the example of riding the bike, makes it more difficult to ride the bike. And that's true with any aspect in life, whether we're talking about physical exercise or not. But in physical exercise, especially in any sort of endurance training or physical training, we're going to hit those times where our body wants to slow down. It wants to stop. And how do we move past that limitation? Not by ignoring our body, not by ignoring ourselves, but by embracing all of it. And so the first thing we want to do is realize that there's that fear side of us that is kind of coming into play. And when we feel the limitations of our body, by our own label, I might add, we start to want to give in to that. But we have a couple ways in which we don't give in. And one can be expectations, which leaves us over on this fighting side of the equation. The other is to become aware of that, fold into a true mindfulness, not just a consciousness, but a true mindfulness of the action that we're in, whether it's weightlifting or biking or running or whatever it may be, to push not beyond our own limits, but through our limits. Like, how do we push through to see what's on the other side? Is our body ready to be on the other side of that limit? And as we go through, we're staying very present, not only to our body, but to the rhythm and the fluidity of the motion that we're in from a physical perspective. So we're really working as one. And that's the mindfulness, is to really become one with the exercise, whether it's biking or whatever it may be. The mindfulness is becoming one with it, so present that you're actually in unison with, in oneness with the activity. Then all of a sudden we get to see what our body is doing with the activity. We're not ignoring it, we're honoring it in the rhythm. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I think it can be so, 100% with everything you just said. I think sometimes, though, it's very subtle and very nuanced, like all these ways in which, like, your mind is going, you have so many thoughts throughout the day, so many thoughts while you're exercising, and you're constantly, there's such subtleties to how you're, like, words that you're using and how you're speaking and where you're pulling motivation from. It's a very, like, it can be a very subtle thing, but I think if you pay a lot of attention and you really think about where you're pulling your motivation from in your inner dialogue, is it fear-based? Is it based on the love of making yourself stronger, the love of the effort and how that is going to make you, like, a stronger, better person? It's very subtle. I think sometimes it's very nuanced, and I think a lot of times people, myself, I think about the inner dialogue all the time, and I find myself all the time I'm using motivation that's slightly fear-based, and I'll catch myself and I'll be like, oh wow, yeah, that's actually not how I want to think about it.
Right.
And
we're not really motivated by fear, right?
yeah,
We're motivated to get away from fear.
yeah,
right? So there's a lot of loss of energy in that equation.
yeah.
Whereas when you're motivated by the joy, it's just pure energy. You're not fighting against anything. You're just, right? It's quite different. It's interesting because that motivation is a critical piece of your puzzle.
Yeah.
And when people, I do want to throw this out there too, you're listening to Johnny and I talk about this, but imagine your own thoughts inside. What are they? And do they come from a more fear-based thought where you're thinking you can't and you're anchored in limiting and old beliefs? And what are those beliefs? And so allow yourself to think about them without judging them. And that's where I'd like to go right now, is that, when we have these inner thoughts, we want to really listen to them as well. Don't just fight against them and try to get rid of them and hop over to this other side and try to make it this, because all that's try, right? So allow yourself to listen to the thoughts, even when they're fear-based or what we call negative thoughts. Allow yourself to listen and then ask yourself, where is this coming from? Now, if you can honor yourself enough to know that you're going to ask where that's all coming from, now you can put it aside and say, I really love what I'm doing and I want to be more present and I want to go forward. And so we're looking at then addressing the very piece that interferes with our body's expression. This is where body, mind, and spirit really come together as one. And so you can start to see where meditation and exercise, you can meditate while you're exercising. You can meditate while you're biking, running, walking, lifting. You can always meditate while you're working out. The question is how you meditate in each of those activities. Because you want to make sure that you're bringing your mind into such a sharp focus that you're at one with self and the machine or exercise, whatever it is you're doing. And that meditation that brings you in connection with your spiritual higher realm, what is going on. And so that keeps you a lot more clear, focused, and the motivation that comes deep from within and out, but leaves you in connection with the body instead of being outside connection with the body. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's important to put those two pieces together.
Yeah. I think in my life also, I understand. I feel like I understand. Okay, this is a love-based kind of motive or love-based thought or a fear-based thought. But a lot of the time, it's one thing to understand and to be able to just say objectively, this is that or that. But sometimes, in the moment in life, it's so difficult. Like the fear, it's one thing to know it's fear, but when it is so strong and overwhelming, there's always an easy, I shouldn't say there's always, but a lot of time there's an easy way out to handling that fearful situation. And, you can understand that this is a fear-based situation or a fear-based motive, or this is just fear affecting me. But when it punches you in the face and you are terrified, it can take an immense amount of strength to choose the higher road or choose the love-based motive because the fear is so overwhelming. And I think that is something that is having tools and having tools to handle those situations, I think is important. I have my own tools and mental strategies for those. But also I think it comes back to also the practice. When you find yourself in those situations, it's like you've practiced and this is why like I come back to like being aware of it constantly and the inner dialogue and being really attentive to the subtleties of it and just thinking about it all the time, because especially if you're someone who deals with anxiety like I have and I still do, it's when you get rocked by something that is terrifying, if you haven't, it's like anything in life. If you don't practice it, if you're not aware of it, if you don't practice the love-based internal dialogue, and you don't practice doing the little things with the right motivation behind them, you're gonna get to these big moments, and it's unlikely that you're gonna be able to stay love-based in your motives and not give into the fear. So I think finding also, yeah, so I think that is why I think being so attentive to the inner dialogue like all the time and seeing where you're pulling your motivation from, is your motivation love-based, is it fear-based, is so critical because that is really how you overcome the big barriers in life. Because like you'll find like the thing, like to make changes, I believe, to yourself, to make like really impactful changes, I think is not easy. It's very difficult, and it can be incredibly scary. Just like the process of rewiring your brain it's not an easy thing really, unless you're like 3 years old or, so and sometimes it's incredibly scary and difficult to handle certain situations. So that's just why I think I stress the importance of the inner dialogue.
Yes, and it is there are several ways to change that inner dialogue, right? You can, if you hit a time of fear, you can immediately launch into a gratitude, because when you're thankful for something, you cannot feel fear at the same time, right? So you can say a gratitude at that time. That'll help shift. You can do an affirmation. You could do a mantra. A mantra is a short sentence or phrase or paragraph that you say over and over and over again. And if it's positive and it's anchored in a gratuitous feeling, then that pulls you. That works both with your feeling as well as your inner dialogue. But that inner dialogue has to be shifted in some way. And as you said, the nuances and subtleties of those thoughts and emotions can really be what rules the roost. So your awareness, more heightened, allows you to become keyed into your own self enough to know through inner words or emotion. So, let me throw a little bit of an extra teaching in here. At the core of everything are our emotions, right? And you've heard Johnny talking about love-based versus fear-based, and those emotions, all of our emotions can be thrown into one of those two categories. And emotions are energy, and so energy is always has been, always will be. So if we think of that as the core of everything, that's at the bottom of this equation, right? We're always feeling, and our body is always in a state of emotion, because that's also the way we interpret the world. And it's always either in a fear-based or a love-based feeling. So it's an infinite line because it's energy. Out of all of our emotion come our thoughts, right? Just some of those emotions are what's going to make our thoughts pop. So then we have these thoughts. So let's imagine that the emotions are this big. Out of all of these emotions, we have this many thoughts generated. Out of all of the thoughts in our head, only some of them have words associated with them. Some are just lingering in the background without words yet. And out of all of the thoughts with words, only some of those words are actually spoken, right? To self or other. In this case, we're talking about to self. So we're looking at this upside down funnel. So the pressure coming out of the top of that pressure nozzle is pushed forward by emotion. So if we've got a lot of fear and we're trying just to change our thoughts, we're going to constantly be in this fight, because our emotions are at the core. But if we can accept this and then shift over, genuinely knowing why we stepped into this exercise mode in the first place. What is really our core reason? If that's joy generated and love generated and honoring of self generated, then those gratuitous thoughts will align with the words spoken and will align as they affect you and everything that you're doing. And that alignment is very powerful. If we stay in the fear and just switch our thoughts, we're going to constantly feel this imbalance, this push. So we can make the switch as long as I said earlier, we're willing to ask what this fear is about, right? Because we want that to switch. We want to be able to be all on the same side of this equation, if you will. So go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing, yeah. But yeah, well, I guess in like for me, I have a lot of tools to get myself. I don't know. I don't. Maybe I do have tools or like certain ways of handling certain situations, but to get myself to be more in like out of the fear-based kind of motive, I think about how do I build mental strength, because that's really like to be able to choose the love-based motive in the face of fear and difficulty takes mental strength. So, and how do you get strong? You put in work to get strong. So it's about, in a way, you can think about it as mental repetitions. How do I get mentally strong? How do I get a little bit better at handling these very fear-based situations so that I can choose the love-based motive and not be as affected by the fear, which is going to just give me a better life? And you have to trust that too. You have to know at your core, you really have to trust that, all right, I know this is difficult, I know this is scary, but if I take the love-based motive, if I don't give into the fear, it will give me a better life, and I will ultimately feel more rewarded from it and better from it. But how I practice getting kind of better at that and being better at handling those stressful situations is by doing things that reward effort, I'd say, and doing things that are a little bit outside my comfort zone. And it's very, I think, you come into situations all the time throughout your day-to-day life where you can take the slightly easier route, or you can, you know what, let me give the extra 1% here and do something a little tough, something that's or a little bit harder than I want to do it, but it's going to make me kind of lean into that, like that fear a little bit, and just be not quite as afraid. It's all the time in life. And I think once you start rewarding and really thinking about like, I'm happy, I feel good that I put in a little bit of extra effort there, and you really start thinking about it, not about results, not about any sort of ego-based anything. It's all about building myself, building my character, and rewarding the effort and being a little bit stronger maybe of a person. Then you find yourself, everything in life gets a little bit easier.
Yes. I love that you brought up rewarding yourself. I don't think we celebrate ourselves and reward ourselves enough. And I love what else you said about reward. If we're rewarding each step along the way, then success is inevitable. But if we're waiting until this ultimate success in order to celebrate, we're killing ourselves. So to each step of the way, with each bit of success, we celebrate, we reward ourselves. I wonder, if this puts you on the spot, don't do it, but can you help the listener with some of these tricks that you use that help you move into the love-based side? What are some of the tricks you use? I gave the idea of gratitudes, affirmations, and mantras. What are you doing, Johnny, that helps you move over?
So a lot of times I've tried when I come into a situation that's very stressful for me and scary. I really try to focus on, and this comes from learning and reading stuff about neuroscience. I sometimes even find a point, like for my vision, and I focus on a specific point. It can be anywhere. And I try to just focus on, I have certain words that I say to myself, like calm, like I say calm, I say, it depends on the specific situation, but I'll say love, I'll say character, I'll say intuition, and I'll use these words, and I'll look at a point, and sometimes if I'm in a situation, I'm in a setting, I'll literally just, I'll go to the bathroom, or I'll say I have to go to the bathroom. A very stressful situation. Because, you can kind of, a lot of the time you can just, if you can go to, you can go to the bathroom. You have an excuse to go to the bathroom. So I'll go to the bathroom, and I'll literally just, I'll stand there and, or I'll just look at, I'll go into a stall, or I'll go to another room maybe, and you just pick a point of visual focus, because like when I just know from listening to Andrew Huberman, he's a neuroscientist, I listen to him a lot, and when your eyes are focused on a specific point, it activates your brain in a way that really heightens your focus. And so if you can bring your focus to these positive emotions like fearlessness, calm, love, character, intuition, and you say to yourself, I trust that these emotions are gonna give me gonna make me a happier person and give me a better life. That is what I found to be just that, I guess, that tool, you could say, is one of the best tools that I found to handling very intense, stressful situations. Just immediately being aware that all right, my emotions have now swung into a very fear-based kind of state, and I'm very triggered to want to say something or do something that is not love-based or in the pursuit of character and love, as you would say. You kind of almost don't have any focus at that point. Your emotions are you really can't even find a touch of what that love-based path is in that moment, because you are so in the fray of fear. So that's why I try to either get myself to a different room, find a new setting, and find a visual point of focus to just try to bring those love-based emotions back into my field of focus, into my mind, so I'm not strayed to fear.
It's interesting, yes, and that actually that actually does work beautifully for everybody. And I'm going to give you a little sidebar on that. When we focus, when we're feeling fear, our body is out of balance. When we focus on a particular point, physical point in front of us, we are in balance. So not only are we in balance, but when we do that and we're aligning everything, and you did by nature, you went like this as you were talking, as we find that central point, that focal point, we pull everything back into balance. And the body by nature wants to be on the love side of the equation. Fear is the out of balance. Fear is the off center. Fear is the interrupter. Love is the truth of what we are. So when you do that, you are bringing yourself back. That was a brilliant and beautifully described tool that everybody can use. And we did talk a little bit about anxiety today, and a lot, actually, more than we actually used the word. we were talking about anxiety and a lot of this, and it is important to understand. God, we need to do a podcast on that too, somehow. But it really is important to understand that when that anxiety starts to bubble up in any way, the sooner we can be aware of it and use Johnny's ideas, or the better. When we're exercising, the beauty is we're oxygenating the blood because we're breathing and we're bringing oxygen into the blood. And when we're in a fear state, we have very high carbon dioxide in our blood, and we need the oxygenation to bring that down to help us again find that balance. So everything you're teaching today, Johnny, is critically important to someone struggling with that anxiety or that fear at the time of exercising, and hitting that fear point and not knowing if they can go forward or back. And even in life, if you hit that fear point, you don't know if you can go forward or you want to give back into it. All of the things that we've spoken about today are going to be extremely helpful. So I hope as you're listening that you really do think about your own life, and you may not feel anxiety in a way that's intense. And then again, you just may, because a lot of people really do struggle with anxiety at times in their lives. And so when it comes up, there are a couple tools you can use. And I think we went through some of them. There are more than what we talked about today, but when we talk about strength training, these are definitely a few. Do you have one last thing you want to say?
Yeah, I guess I have one more thing to my list of maybe words and things that I say to myself when I'm in these stressful situations. And one is, like, you are not who you were in the past. Like, you are, it doesn't matter if that moment was a split second ago. To be able to dissociate your identity from who you were in the past versus who you are now. And you can always be a better version, or you can always be a better version of yourself from the past. So I think so many times in my life when I'm feeling negative about something that happened in the past, to be able to say to myself, that's not necessarily who I am now, though. I can always be a better version from what I was in the past. It doesn't matter how recent it was. It doesn't matter how bad it was. I mean, theoretically, it's true, really. I mean, you just
Totally.
That I think is something that is been very impactful and powerful for me to say to myself. Be able to dissociate from who you were in the past.
Yes. I think that's invaluable. I think that there's a lot of truth to that, right? We're in a constant state of change. And so when we keep thinking we are who we used to be, then we don't give ourselves time to change. If we keep assuming that we're going to feel the way we did or that we can't because of the way we were, then again, we're not going to give ourselves room for the change. And so, yes, by understanding that we are always able to move towards a better version of ourselves, to always, and this is why we call it over here a conscious journey of enlightenment, because if we're conscious of everything going on, then we're constantly moving toward that that magical outcome, right? That place where life is absolute freedom and tranquility. How do you get there? Well, by moving beyond the fear and believing in change and knowing that who you are is far beyond who you were in yesteryear, right?
Yeah.
It's just
in yesteryear, and like, even for me, like literally 2 minutes ago, like, is something.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the time you're being triggered by something that like just happened, and let's say you're in an argument, or there's like, it's something that literally very recently happened. It's easier to dissociate from something that happened like a year or months ago or days ago. But the closer it is to the present moment, I think the more it sticks to you. But like, the more you can really get yourself to come back, or to dissociate from the ego and dissociate from the past, that I am better than I was, or I can be better than I was, even if it's 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, that's a beautiful comment and very, very, very well understood. Yes, thank you for that. That was very helpful. Any other last thoughts before I wrap up? That was some pretty powerful stuff there, Johnny.
No, I'm glad I kind of, I feel like I started off a little bit. My mind was in a little bit of a blunder, but I hopefully started to make some sense towards the end.
Oh, you did. I think you did. I think it's interesting. We started with exercise, we ended with life, but exercise is life. And as we push through what we said, right? As you push through the limitations that you're perceiving that are put upon you by fear, even in your exercise, it's the same as in life. If you can push through those limitations, if you can believe in yourself, if you can find that inner dialogue that shifts your character from what it is in that minute of doubt or that second of doubt to a place of belief, to a place of knowing that you can, if you can follow that focal point within you and outside of you and stay centered on it, you will clear your mind, you will clear your